What I use for filing, sanding, and scraping. Probably the most important tool that I use, I would say, is probably my Optivisor. This is an actual Optivisor brand. I don't think there's any better as far as this style or type or price range. But this really helps when you're trying to take care of seams and blemishes and whatnot, especially on small parts. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention the use of an Optivisor when it comes down to actually prepping your parts for final, making them ready to prime. The first tool would be the files. Mini files. I get these from Home Depot. These are the HDX brand. They've got molded in handles. They're not super high quality as you would get in a expensive Swiss file set, which I have about an $80 Swiss file set, which I use for my machining work at work. But they're good. They're a little coarser, a little rougher, but that actually works to an advantage with plastic modeling because they don't load up as quickly. And I would highly recommend this set. It's around $5. And I bought these actually with a coupon, a $2 off coupon, so they were about $3 for this set. And they work great. They clean up easily, and they work fine. They have all your main shapes you need that everybody's pretty much, the typical sets you get. And then I have one larger round file, a rat tail file, that I use for rounding out holes and opening holes and things like that. It's a little bit coarser. And then the other thing I would offer with those is to get a wire brush. That's probably the best way to clean them. I know some people try to use acetone or rub them on their jeans and things like that, but really the best way to clean these files, these mini files, is with the wire brush. Now this one's a little coarser than I would like, but it does do the job. But keeping the file clean, it just keeps it clean, keeps it sharp. The next step up would be the sanding sticks. I use the heck out of these things, and I mean, I just get them everywhere, mostly at these beauty supply shops, here and there, online. Some of them, I think most of them, or I think some of them came from dollar stores and whatnot. These sticks have lasted me for a long time, but as you can see, what I do is I cut them on an angle in the middle. You can use a hobby knife or you can use scissors to cut those. And then what I do, as the edge gets worn and frazzled, I will cut another 1/8 of an inch or so off of it, and it exposes a fresh edge. And when I typically use everywhere from here around to about here. I rarely use like this whole edge, or it's this is the working area as I use them. And what I do is I just keep cutting them, and it exposes a fresh edge, and they last forever that way. It just works wonders. I mean, these things have been around forever. I'm going on to a couple years now of using the same sanding sticks by using that method. Now I can't take credit for that myself. I got this idea from Mike Hyundai, Stress Factor, and he didn't mention this or show a video about it, but I saw it in the background. I noticed that all of his cutters were snipped off on an angle in the middle, and light bulb went off, and sure enough, it's just a great idea, guys. It really works great. Saves you a lot of money and time. Okay, and then the next step, I guess, is going right up to the sandpapers. I buy sandpaper when I can get it wet dry. I stick with the wet dry. I've got everywhere from about 220. Here's some 320 non-wet dry, but it's a good grit. But I stick with the wet dry. You can get the stuff at Harbor Freight. You can get it, buy the good 3M stuff or whatever. You can get it at, your box stores. Of course, there's a limited grits that you can get. Here's some 800. That is probably the most, in my opinion, the most useful and most used grit that I use by a long shot is 800 grit. 600s are pretty common. A lot of guys use that. Use it for final prime sanding. I think 800 is a little better. but yet it's a little fine. I don't know, something about 800 grit. It seems to be the magical grit. And then, you know, 1000s, 1200. And then you get up into your sets that have the higher grits, the, you know, 1200s to 2000s. You can get it from Tamiya, you can get it from Stevens International, you can get it from a number of different places. This is from Stevens. This takes all the way from 320 to 12,000. And I'm actually going to talk, I'm going to be later on after I do this video, I'll be talking to Chip from Extreme Scale Detail. I know he is a seller for Stevens International. I'm going to ask him about stocking this set of sanding grits and see what he thinks about it. I think it's good to have for everybody. A sheet like this lasts a long time, especially it's wet dry. But otherwise, you know, you just pick up your grits. Of course, I got enough. I chop the sheets down and to fit in envelopes, and then yeah, just use that to kind of catalog what I have as far as sheets, and put them in a shelf and kind of have them back up in there, and then I can just kind of dig through and find if I need to what grit I need. And the way I use those is I chop them down into small pieces, and I have a little tackle box here. You know, just a typical tackle box. Little tackle box, and I have with a Sharpie I wrote various grits that I use, most common, and then I just chop little pieces and put them in there, and I just keep replenishing it from those sheets that I showed. So this is what essentially stays on my workbench, is this little tackle box here, and that's it. And of course, sandpaper, I mean, we use the heck out of that, guys. We all know that. And no matter what genre of modeling you do, you've got your sandpaper selection and little bits and pieces and stuff. So that's how I do that. And I also have crafted a few of my own homemade little sanding things. These are pieces of aluminum. I don't know where I got them from. They got some holes in them. They're flat pieces of aluminum, and all I do is just take some sandpaper. I use the 3M adhesive spray and attach a couple different grits to these flat pieces, and obviously they're used the heck out of for flat sanding seamed parts and things like that, you know, and it doesn't take a whole lot to peel it off and replenish the piece, although man, this stuff lasts forever. And then I've made a actual block out of some plastic. I just happened to get in this shape, and the same thing, I just sprayed some 3M spray on it. So, and this is an actual 45 degree, so I guess if I, you know, and there has been a couple occasions where I've actually laid some pieces and sanded them at 45, you know, especially when you're doing frames and things like that. But it's, you know, you still got your flat surface to sand on. You can actually use it to sand. You can use this corner to get up into pieces and sand. Yeah, it's just some homemade stuff, but you know, everybody out there is pretty much crafty enough to come up with their own little sanding devices. Then we get into the scraping. This is something kind of fairly new to me. I've been experimenting with for a while. I've seen a couple videos from people, some prominent modelers that have really started touting how well scrapers work. And I can tell you from my own experience, when I bought these, I bought this set from Hobbylink Japan, and I bought it with an order of a model, a couple models I bought. I threw this pack in there, which contains some scrapers. And I thought, well, you know, I'll play with it, give it a shot. It wasn't that much. And since I was making an order, it wasn't much to throw it in with the order, you know, as far as, you know, with the shipping and everything. So, versus buying it by itself and shipping it from Japan. But you can get scrapers from various companies in different shapes and formats and whatnot. Now these have a radius on them. As you can see, it's just a metal piece with a radius. You've got different sizes, different diameters. This goes from a 2mm, 4mm to an 8mm. Which seems to kind of cover everything. And man, these things, I didn't take them serious at first, but as I've been using these, I fell in love with them. They're fantastic. I mean, it leaves you can actually leave a finish on rounded parts by scraping the seam that you don't even have to go back and sand. It leaves such a smooth finish. And I've actually fell in love with these things. You know, for example, like a drive shaft in a car, you always have your offset seam on there. This is not a drive shaft, this is a strut, by the way, but just as an example. And then you just take this through there. You got to kind of get the right angle, and then once you find it, you just start scraping, and it leaves this it just leaves a perfectly rounded, super smooth, non-seamed finish. Now, of course, you know, there's some stuff is so bad in molding and that it's offset so much that some filler is going to have to be involved. But, you know, in those cases where all you got to do is just scrape seams off of round parts, these do a great job. I can't promote this enough. And just do your research. Go out there and look for radius scrapers for plastic models, and there's all different types. There's metal pieces that have different cutouts all around them, and it does a great job. It's definitely worth having. I find it works much better than what I've been doing in the past. I was using a Flexifile to try to do rounded edges and things and surfaces, but I found that this still will leave a flat, and then you got to mess around and find the right grit, or otherwise you got to go change grits and then go back and sand. Anyway, I found that I can just take one of these, pick the right diameter, and it helps to go with a little bit bigger than what's, if you're unsure, if you don't have the perfect size, always go with a little bit bigger diameter, and it'll just scrape it down as smooth as can be. I mean, super smooth. Leaves a very smooth finish. And that's it. I mean, aside from my actual hobby knife, I mean, as far as scraping goes, I mean, when I cut my part from the sprue, I usually use my snippers, typically. Sometimes I'll cut or saw. But in most cases, I use a snipper to cut. I leave a little bit, and then I'll take my knife and try to get it down as close as possible, and then I'll go with all these other tools that I've showed so far. So that, I guess I would, you know, that is an integral part of when I cut parts from a tree. I usually snip them, cut them down with the knife, down close, and then I go with the sandpaper, a file, you know, whatever from that point. And the only thing left that I use is, you know, buffing sticks and stuff like that. You know, you got this from Flexifile. You can get these at Hobby Lobby. I found that these don't last. As you can see, this is pretty tore up. This doesn't have a lot of use on it. I've actually found these at the dollar stores, which have all this different grits and things on it. They're not, you know, very well made. I mean, they peel. You know, the paper peels on them. You can always put a little glue under that. But I found these actually last a lot longer. And the two sides on these things, you've got step 5, 6, 7, and 8, or yeah, 6, 7, 5, 4, 5, 6, 7 work great, and they last. So I found that once I cut a piece, snip it, sand it, and then I take this cheap 50-cent thing here, I hit it with the step 5, then I go to 6, 7, and 8, you're left with a full polished part that works out great. So this little cheapy thing here, I've bought several of them. You can find them at dollar stores. Cheaply made, like I said. I don't really mess with these sides much, but you can use it to flatten off rough sand things. But I found that these edges here, they hold up good, and man, they'll take your part to a fantastic finish. But that's it. I keep it simple. I don't, you know, I've bought these things. I've bought all kinds of different gizmos and sanders. Like I said, the Flexifile. I don't even use this anymore. I just use basically the sanding sticks, files, sandpaper, and the scrapers. And then on occasion a final buffer. And then I have my little homemade things, which are basically just flat plates for sanding on. But anyway, that covers it. Scraping, filing, sanding. The next part of what I use will probably be covering putties and things like that. But anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to y'all later.